Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. In this video I want to talk about header files in C++. So I will explain what are header files, what is their purpose. I will show you how you can create your own header files, include them and use them in C++ programs. And I also want to say that this is very important topic in C++. This is very important lesson that you should not skip, because if you want to become a developer, you will work with header files very often. So make sure to watch the entire video so that you can get a really good understanding of header files. And then also, if you have any questions, you can leave those in the comments section, because I read all the comments, and if I see that there is a need to make a specific video, that you have problems with understanding certain topics and that you need help, I will definitely make that video. And then also, for those of you who are having problems with finding bugs and fixing those bugs and with improving your code in general, I want to say that there are tools that you can use for that. And those are code analyzers. Now, the one that I would recommend is called PVS Studio, and I'm going to find it and then I will show you. So it is this one here, and I will put the link in the description. But as I said, PVS Studio is a code analyzer, which means that it will help you to find bugs and to fix those bugs, and it will also help you to improve the quality of your code in general. And I made a video related to PVS Studio a few months ago. In that video, I explained how you can use it, how you can install it, which is very simple. I will put the link to that video here. I will put it in the description as well, so make sure to check it out. But basically, when I made that video, I didn't have many subscribers, so I believe that most of my new viewers are actually not familiar with this tool at all. So since I made that video, I still have a coupon code that you can use in order to get 1 month free trial of PVS Studio, so that you can test it and see how it can help you to become a better programmer. So I will leave that link that you need to follow in order to get 1 month free trial in the description, and also I will put more details in the description of this video. So if you're struggling with finding bugs, with fixing those bugs, and if you need help to improve your code, make sure to check out PVS Studio, because there is no need to waste so much time doing that manually when you can do it in just a couple of seconds with the tools like PVS Studio. So all the details will be in the description, and now I will return to Visual Studio and I will explain header files, because that is the topic of this video. So in order to understand header files, you will need to understand the following example. Everything that you want to use in C++ first has to be declared. So if you want to use a variable, you first need to declare that variable. So you first need to say, for example, int age, and then you can assign the value to this variable. So then you can say either here that age is equal to 25, or you can assign it in the next line. So you can say age is equal to 25 here, like this. But first you need to declare that variable. So first you need to say to your compiler, hey, there will be this variable called age, and it will be of type int. Now, the same goes for functions as well. If you want to use a function, you first need to declare and define that function in order to be able to use it. And if you are not familiar with functions at all, make sure to watch my video related to functions. Actually, I have full playlist that I will link here and in the description as well, because you first need to watch that in order to be able to understand this video. So the rule is that if you want to use a function, you need to make declaration and definition of that function, and declaration of that function goes before your main function, and then definition goes after your main function. So what I want to do now is I want to create a function that will be called, for example, recommend me a food, and that function will receive one letter, and the goal of that function is to return the name of the food that starts with that letter. So to recommend you a food that starts with that letter. So in order to do that, I will put declaration of that function here. So I will say the function name will be recommend me a food, like this. And then the function will receive one letter, so it will be one character, which I will call first letter. And the goal is that this function returns the word, the name of the food that starts with this letter. So this function will return a const char pointer, like this. So this here is declaration of this function, and it goes before main function, and then definition goes after our main function. So now I'm going to define this function. So I'm going to implement it and describe what this function here is doing. So I will say that inside these curly brackets here will be the implementation of this function here. And what this function here will do is the following. So I will say if first letter is equal to, for example, letter A, or first letter is equal to capital letter A, what I want to do is I want to return food that is called apple. Okay? And then if this here is not the case, I'm going to check for something else. So I'm going to say else if first letter is equal to B, or first letter is equal to capital letter B, I will return banana like this. And then let me copy this one more time. And here we will say else if first letter is equal to letter C or capital letter C. In that case, I want to recommend a food that is chocolate cake, for example, like this. And then I will add one last else, which will return pizza, like this. Okay, so this here is a default scenario in case that none of these other if-elses result as true. So now what I can do is I can invoke this function here. So inside my main function, I will delete this age variable. I don't need it anymore. And I will say std cout, and then today I will eat. And then let's use this recommend me a food function in order to see what we will eat today. So recommend me a food that starts with letter C, for example. Okay, now if I run this program, let's see what will happen. Okay, as you can see, it says that today I will eat chocolate cake, so it works as it should. But now I have one very important question for you. And my question is following. Here we have only one CPP file, which is called main.cpp. But what would happen if we had more than one file? If we had 2 or 3 or 100 CPP files? And then another part of that question is, what would happen if more than one file wanted to use this function here, this recommend me a food function? So should we copy this declaration and then this definition on more than one place? So should we copy this declaration and this definition in every CPP file that wants to use this function here? The answer is no. And in order to be able to understand this, you will first need to understand a little bit about how compilation of program works. So now I am going to explain that. So when a program is compiled, every single CPP file will be compiled into an independent compilation unit. And this is how object files are made. So for each CPP file, your compiler will generate an OBJ file. And one very important thing to keep in mind is that these compilation units are independent. So these CPP files are independent, which means that one CPP file has absolutely no idea what kind of code is declared in another CPP file. They are independent. Now, after your compiler has generated all of these OBJ files, the job of your linker will be to link all of those OBJ files together. So now your linker will combine all of the OBJ files into one, which will be your application. So that is usually the file that has extension .exe, which means executable, which is your application or your program. So this process is very simple. Again, you write CPP files, which are source code files. After that, your compiler is going to take those CPP files and generate OBJ files, so object files. And then after that, your linker will take those OBJ files and combine them into one, which will be your application. Very simple. Now, one very important thing that I said is that those compilation units are independent, which means that if you wanted to use this recommend me a food function in more than one CPP file, you would have to copy this declaration in that file as well. So if you wanted to use it in 10 different CPP files, you would have to copy the declaration in 10 different CPP files. But if you try to copy this definition in more than one CPP file in your program, you will get an error. Why? The answer is following. When your linker tries to link all of those OBJ files together, it will say, oh my god, I have more than one implementation for the same function. So I have implementation in this file and then in this file here as well. So now when someone tries to invoke this recommend me a food function, which one of these two will be invoked? This one or this one? So that is not allowed. And I will demonstrate that on the example that we have in our Visual Studio. So if you try to make multiple definitions, that will cause an error. You will get a duplicate error, or you will get redefinition error of this function here. So as I said, if you want to use this recommend me a food function in another CPP file, then you need to copy its declaration in that CPP file as well. And then if you want to use it in 100 CPP files, you will have to copy this line in 100 CPP files. Now, it's not a problem when it is one function, but if you have 10 functions or 100 functions, you would have to copy 100 declarations. That is one thing. And then another thing, if you try to copy this definition in all of those files, actually, if you try to copy it more than once, you will get a problem. So let's demonstrate that. I am going to copy this function, and if I try to run my program, as you can see, we get an error, and that error says, let's see, it says function recommend me a food already has a body, which means that this is not allowed. So you are trying to create another implementation of this function here that already has been implemented. So I am going to remove this, and now I'm going to explain you the way that is often used for this in C++. So what C++ programmers came up with is to create a separate file, which is called header file. And inside that header file, you put all of the declarations. So is it one declaration or 10 declarations or 100 declarations? You put them all in your header file. And then you make another file, which is called implementation. And inside that implementation file, you put definitions. So you put implementations. And now, whenever you want to use the functions that are declared in that header file, you just include that header file. If you want to use those functions in one CPP file, you include the header file in one CPP file. If you want to use them in 100 CPP files, you are going to just include that header file in 100 CPP files, instead of copying 100 declarations in 100 CPP files, which can be very tedious, and also it can be very error prone. It can cause many bugs and errors if you are not very, very careful. So I'm going to show you now how you can create your own header file and implementation file in Visual Studio. So I will create this header file inside this folder here called header files so that it is well organized. So right click on it and then add new item, and then here you will select header file. And if you're not able to see and select this header file, make sure that Visual C++ is selected on this left menu. So Visual C++ and then header file, and here as you can see by default header files have .h extension. So the name of my header file will be food.h, for example, and I will click add, and as you can see it has been created successfully. And here we have this pragma once, and I'm going to explain this in a couple of minutes. No need to worry about it now. So now I want to create another file, which will be implementation file, and I will create it here. So I'm going to say right click, add new item, and then here I will create a CPP file that has the same name, so food, but it has different extensions, so food.cpp, and that will be our implementation file. So as you can see, it has been created successfully. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to copy all of the declarations inside my food.h, so inside my header file. So I'm going to return to my main.cpp and I'm going to delete this declaration and then I'm going to paste it here. So now this declaration has been moved to our header file, and the next step is to move all of the definitions inside our implementation file. So here inside this implementation file, I will say, hey, you will be implementation file for this food.h header file. So please include all of the declarations that it contains. So I will say include, and then in these quotation marks, I will say food.h like this. So after I have imported all of the declarations, what I want to do now is I want to provide definitions for the declarations that are available in this header file here. So I will go into my main.cpp and I will delete this definition from main.cpp and I will move it inside my food.cpp, so inside my implementation file. Okay, now if I go back to my main.cpp, as you can see, we have an error here which says, hey, what is this recommend me a food? I don't have the declaration for this function anymore. So now what we have to do is just include this food.h header file wherever we want to use this function here. So now I'm going to do that. So here I'm going to say include again, and then I will use these double quotation marks and I will include this food.h header file that we just created. And now if I try to run this program, okay, as you can see, the error has disappeared and our program works as it should. Now, one very important thing that I want you to notice is this include iostream. So is this iostream also a header file? The answer is yes, but this is pre-existing header file, which means that this header file is available with your compiler, whereas this header file here is the one that we created. So this is user-defined header file. Now, the difference is that this iostream header file can be included using these angled brackets, and then you can also use these double quotation marks, whereas for your own header files, you always need to use these double quotation marks in order to include them. Okay, now your question might be, what is this iostream used for? So let's delete it and see what will happen. Okay, as you can see, immediately we get an error with this cout command, and if I try to build my program, if I try to run it, we have error. So that is because iostream provides us with standard input and output services, and those are commands like cout and cin that we have been using very, very often. So in order to use this command, I will need to return include iostream, and as you can see, immediately that error disappears. Okay, so again, the benefit of creating your own header file is that now if you want to use this recommend me a food function in more than one CPP file, all you need to do is just include this header file in 10 files, in 100 files, in 1000 files, doesn't really matter. So just include header file. Okay, and then one more thing is that this include is called preprocessor directive, which means that it will tell to your compiler before you try to process this CPP file here, please include this food header file. So that is what this include does. So now if I wanted to add another function inside my header file, what I would do is I would add declaration here. So let's say, for example, void get pizza recipe. And I have no idea how recipe is spelled, so let me check it out on Google Translate. So it's get pizza recipe like this, and inside our header file I will just put declaration. So inside my food.h we have declaration, and then the implementation will go inside this food.cpp file. So here I will implement this function. I will say that whenever someone is looking for pizza recipe, I will just write out the recipe of pizza. So I will say std.cout, and then I will say to make pizza, you need, and then here you can write out the full recipe, okay? But here we have an error, and that error is the same error that we had in our main.cpp when we removed this iostream. So that means that if we want to use this cout command inside our food.cpp, we need to include iostream header file here as well. So I am going to copy it from here, and then I will include it here, and this error should disappear, as you can see. So now we have successfully added another function to our food.h header file. So here is declaration, it's get pizza recipe, and then inside our food.cpp implementation file, we have the implementation of that function. So it is get pizza recipe, and then here is the implementation of that function. Now, whenever we want to use this function, all we need to do is we need to include this food.h header file, and we already have that header file inside our main.cpp, which means that now I can invoke get pizza recipe inside my main.cpp. Okay, so I will add a line here like this so that the text is nicely formatted, and then if I try to run this program, as you can see, it says first today I will eat chocolate cake, and then to make pizza you need, and then the recipe should follow. Okay, so that is exactly what we have achieved using this header file and an implementation file. So now wherever you want to use this function or this function, you just include your food.h header file. One more thing that I promised to explain is what is this line of code here. So what is this pragma once inside food.h header file? And the answer is that this serves as a guard to ensure that you will not include this header file more than once in a single CPP file. So now your question might be, Saldina, why would I do that? Why would I even try to include the same header file more than once in a single CPP file? And the answer is, first of all, you will probably not do it purposefully. And then second thing is that you will not do it in a program that has 10 lines of code or 20 lines of code, because it is very easy to manage that program. But if you are working on a very complex program that has hundreds and thousands different files, what happens very often is that this chain of includes is formed. So what happens very often is the following situation. So you have file 2 that includes file 1, and then you have file 3 that includes file 2, and then you have file 4 that includes file 3, and you decide also to include file 2. And there you have a problem where you are trying to include duplicate header files. So that is exactly why this pragma once is used, to ensure that you will not include this header file more than once in a specific CPP file. So I hope that this video was helpful and that you understood what are header files and how to use header files in C++. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave those in the comment section. I read all of my comments, and even if I don't manage to answer to all of them, if I see that there are certain topics that you are really struggling with and that you need help with, I will make video related to that topic. And then also, if you have suggestions for my future videos, feel free to put those in the comment section as well. And if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, because that helps me a lot to reach more people and help them to learn programming. And then if you want to watch more videos like this one, subscribe, click the bell icon, and you will get a notification from me every time that I publish a new video. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in some other video. Bye!